Greetings and hello, Kaiser Philip V here. Talk to you today about my second experience at an SSPX chapel. The visit was very nice. I was, once again welcomed warmly. I enjoyed the Mass. The Mass was well said. I had lunch with someone after the Mass, which I very much enjoyed, and I got a copy of a documentary about Archbishop Lefebvre, the founder of the SSPX, which I'll share my thoughts on that with you all after I've finished watching it, and that may take a day or two because it's about an hour and 20 minutes, I believe. I think I've seen bits of it before, but definitely have not sat down and watched a whole documentary of him all the way through. And this one's by Angelus Press, so this one may definitely be very interesting to behold and to read and to watch. And I'm excited to give you my opinions on that. What are my opinions of the Archbishop at this very moment? My only real problems with him would be his political stances. Some of his stances, are very radical and, very out there and kind of, I feel like, prepared the way for more radical fringe elements to come in and damage society's credibility, particularly in France, as these elements were tolerated and given purchase. Now, that's not to say they're the norm of society. As I've said before, most of the people, and it holds true so far, most of the people at the parish are very shocked when I tell them some of the things I've witnessed or I've seen and heard of the society. They're absolutely shocked and appalled. They've either never heard of it, or to them it's just shocking. And if it had appeared in the parish, they wouldn't have tolerated it. People can have ill will on the subject and say that they're lying to me, but why would I believe they would lie to me? I have no reason to believe they would lie to me thus far. I hope they're not lying to me. And I personally I'm fairly good at telling when I'm having the wool pulled over my eyes, and so far I don't have that feeling here. Everyone here feels very sincere and genuine. And again, like I said in my last video, normal people. The society, I'm convinced, is going to have a very prominent role in counter-revolution and counter-reformation because, Rome is not going to be of any help. Rome has clearly bought into the Reformation and is bought into the Revolution. It is openly accepted, these errors, which secular church historians have said, if you don't think the Catholic Church changed with Vatican II, you're absolutely wrong. You're dead wrong. It changed completely. It's a totally different religion. It's absolutely a different thing. I mean, traces of it still exist, obviously, but really, substance-wise, it's a different religion. It's got a different liturgy. Everything about it, the way it acts and carries itself, is different. And I think one of the most staunch examples of that is in politics. I feel like the Catholic Church has kind of ridden the coattails of American conservatism since the Cold War. And I feel like that actually has a lot to do with its change in policies towards other religions in this hope that all religions would band together against the communist threat. Unfortunately, I think the Church overstated exactly how long communism would be a threat. Now, that's not to say that excuses the errors. No, it doesn't. It provides some kind of animus for why, perhaps on a more political level, these changes were made, as wrong as they were. So, what exactly is different about how the Church approaches politics, and what does that have to do with the society? Well, I feel like the society, like I said, has a very good position from which to operate. They're not stuck under Rome's dictates. They're not bound to them in any way, shape, or form. They can divorce themselves from the conciliar church. In fact, they have and they do. They regularly, say, even though they're not in schism, they make it clear they don't have truck with that stuff. So a good way to look at it, in my opinion, is that if you've heard of the American National Catholic Church, they are, in fact, a schismatic, heretical church that sets itself up as a counter-church, and are actual bishops who left the faith to start their own Catholic Church. Have you ever heard Rome denounce them? Have you ever heard of them attacking their religious orders or anything like that? Have you ever heard of anything like that? Have you ever heard conciliars talk so bad about these people? No. I say this because they don't know about them. Why? Because the clergy doesn't talk about them. The clergy doesn't ever condemn them. And perhaps that's because their beliefs are very similar, in fact, to what many conciliar clergy believe, but no, it would be the end of their jobs if they openly profess them. I don't know, but it's in my opinion, it's a compelling example of, the fact that the SSPX is singled out, because the American National Catholic Church is, in fact, a schismatic church. It's a counter-church. They openly teach and preach heresy. The society was a priestly fraternity founded to serve the faithful, to teach them the faith, and to protect the old Mass, founded validly, by the way, through the proper diocesan channels, lied to about what Rome thought of them, and then punished for refusing to die out, for refusing to go away in the face of lies and abuse from Rome. Archbishop Lefebvre didn't even get a hearing, as far as I have been made aware. There was no proper trial for this man. Martin Luther got a trial, people. Okay, Martin Luther got a proper trial before the Diet of Worms. Lefebvre didn't get anything. He got some strongly worded letters. That's about all he got on the subject. But I'm not here to talk about that really, and I'll save more opinions on Lefebvre for after I view the documentary, which may give me some enlightening information. However, what I do want to talk about again is the politics aspect of it. When I was leaving for Mass today, I happened to see across my Tumblr dash, as I was posting admin pics for my outfit for going to Mass, I happened to bear witness to a picture of a link to an article from someone's Facebook that was from crack.com, a rather mainstream website that posts a lot of satire articles and lots of funny articles commentating on history and pop culture and things. But it was talking about, in rather serious terms, well, not totally serious, but serious enough terms, zoophilia. Now, if you're not familiar with what that term means, you can't figure it out for yourself, it's a very nice way of saying bestiality, except with zoophilia, apparently there's not implied, acts. So, I don't want to discuss it much further, because I don't know if you're eating or whatever. So, just suffice it to say that this was used by this person as evidence of the slippery slope, that with the legalization of gay marriage in civil marriage in the United States, it would open the way for more and more degenerate sexualities to take hold in the public sphere. And that may be. But again, I would say that in other countries like Canada and the UK, in Spain, we've not seen this happen. So whether or not it will happen here remains to be seen. Secondly, if it does happen, I feel like it's very important that we learn from our mistakes here. We need to divorce ourselves from the political. The SSPX has the ability, because its identity is solely based upon old school Catholicism. It has the ability to transcend the political parties of America and every country they're in today, to simply, be the church, be the voice for Catholics, to be the animus by which they called it back a while ago, the traditionalist avant-garde emerges on the playing field. They have the ability to do that. They're not bound by the conciliar church or their whims, of playing politics with the of playing politics with like Cardinal Dolan with the Al Smith dinner and things. They're not bound to do that. Our lack of clout kind of plays to our advantage in this case. And lest anyone think, I'm propositing something that's absolutely new and, is like, how can we not take a part in the political mechanization of the U.S.? Well, I would say the reason we can't is because what voice do we have? Catholicism has no legal clout in the United States of America. It is not the basis for the law. It's not the basis for the culture. It's not. It's an important part of it, and Catholics did play an important role in the founding of the U.S., but Catholicism was never viewed as this very important agent, legally at least, for the United States. It was not the state church. It wasn't even a supported church, like in the terms that it had a lot of support among the government. It was just there. And because of this, Catholics in the United States were largely apolitical before the Civil War. Many of them, for example, were pro-abolitionists, but they would not join the Republican Party, which was pro-abolitionist, because the Republican Party was also home to the nativists, or the know-nothings, who, while a minority, were a powerful radical fringe who had inspired violence before against Catholics and were lobbying for anti-Catholic laws and, the closure of parochial schools and all sorts of things like that. And furthermore on that, how many people have we lost over, our efforts to politically combat this? How many Catholics have we lost? And people could say they left because of theology, and some of them have. I know some of them did, but I know a lot of them who just left because they vote Democrat and they no longer felt welcome, which, take that as a good thing or a bad thing, but that's the reason for most of them. A good example, a lot of Catholics are blue dog Democrats because their ancestors were, because Democrats were something of a workers' party in the U.S. The U.S. doesn't have a workers' party. The Democrats kind of function as that, and no one else was gunning for these Catholic immigrant workers who were being exploited. So a lot of Catholics voted Democrat in that respect. And many Catholics had no official political affiliation in the U.S. They were just here, living their lives and living their faith. Enter someone I think is very important to this, Archbishop John Hughes of New York, better known as Dagger John, for his aggressive personality and also because he had the habit of signing the end of his name with a cross, which to those unlearned in Catholic tradition, in which a bishop often signs the end of his name with a cross, it looked like a dagger to the uneducated masses, hence the name Dagger John. He came from Ireland to the U.S. as an immigrant with his family because they were having a really hard time of it under the British Protestant government. The government denied the ability for his sister to be buried in a Catholic cemetery. They refused to grant a permit for it. And his father was attacked by members of the Orange League, which was an anti-Catholic, pro-Protestant monarchist group. His father was attacked by these people. And so his family decided to leave for the United States, where religious freedom was enshrined in law and the government was not persecuting one side or the other. Of course, that didn't stop populist movements from having these opinions, but the fact that the U.S. doesn't have any racist policies on the books doesn't stop people from being racist. So it's kind of the same thing. Archbishop John Hughes, even as a priest, emerged as a plucky defender of, or not necessarily plucky, but rather a very stalwart defender of Catholicism when he debated a Presbyterian minister. Everyone expected this Irish immigrant to be outclassed by a American-educated, Protestant. But he held his own and gained much respect for his defense of Catholicism before opponents. And Archbishop John Hughes also was a staunch opponent of the nativists. When nativist riots reached their peak and 12 churches were burned, in which 12 Catholics overall died, there was a nativist rally that was going to be held in New York. The Archbishop went to the mayor and protested this rally because it was going to incite violence. He told Catholics to arm themselves and to protect their churches and their communities in the event something like this happened. The Archbishop flatly told the mayor of New York, if a single Catholic church is burned in Manhattan, it will become another Moscow, ominously alluding to Napoleon Bonaparte's entry into Moscow, only to find it a burned ruin to keep him from sacking it. A very ominous warning, and the mayor took it very seriously, deciding the nativist rally would not be held and denying the rally a permit. These are just a few quotes from Archbishop John Hughes that I feel like illustrate what I'm trying to say here in terms of a position and really illustrate his character. Protestantism is effete, powerless, dying out, and conscious that its last moment is come when it is fairly set face to face with Catholic truth. Close quote. Now, another quote from him, and his most famous and controversial one, I believe made in the diocesan newspaper: the goal of the Catholic Church is to convert all pagan nations and all Protestant nations. There is no secrecy in this. It is the commission of God to His one Church. Everyone should know that we have for our mission to convert the world, including the inhabitants of the United States, the people of the cities, the peoples of the country, the officers of the Navy and the Marines, the commanders of the Army, the legislature, the Senate, the Cabinet, the President, and all. Close quote. Let it be known beyond a shadow of a doubt that Archbishop John Hughes was probably one of the most staunch, stalwart, and open defenders of Catholicism in the United States. And he was, can you imagine Archbishop Cardinal Dolan saying anything related to this? I dare say Dagger John would have some very strong words for his current successor. Even though Archbishop John Hughes was, an archbishop during the Civil War, he was also the unofficial ambassador to Rome, to the papacy, for the United States government. He also protested strongly the inclusion of the King James Bible into school curriculums in the state of New York, because he argued that it would be double taxation upon Catholics and therefore discrimination, because logically speaking, Catholics would have to not only pay taxes to go to a public school where their children were going to be taught from a Protestant Bible that was written to be against the Catholic Bible, but also they'd have to pay extra for tutors and for Sunday school basically to teach their children, to correct their children, to correct the errors their children were being taught from the margins of the King James Bible and from the off translation. His appeal was denied, but this led to him mandating in a plenary council that every church in his diocese have a parochial school and teach children from the Catholic Bible. So we can see already that Archbishop John Hughes' reaction to the anti-Catholic laws and animus of his day was to strengthen the church internally. He did not necessarily go on the attack politically against the government. If he had been doing that, my question would be, why would he not try to go to the Confederacy and try and lobby the Confederacy for I mean, hey, I can get an entire bunch of Catholics, Irish Catholics on your side in exchange for rights, in exchange for certain rights and liberties. Well, he didn't do that. The exact opposite. In fact, he was a supporter of the Union during the Civil War, and many Irish and Italian regiments were raised from New York to fight in the Civil War with great distinction for it. The 69th is still, I believe, still a regiment in the United States Army to this day, with a very with a very proud martial history. So that's important because it illustrates from a historical standpoint, from our traditions, I guess lowercase tradition, how we've handled situations like this in the past. And Archbishop John Hughes lays it out. The Catholic Church's mission is to convert the United States, to convert all nations. And the United States is not an exception to this. Every nation is to be converted to Catholicism because it's the true faith for the salvation of souls. As he says, this is God's commission to his church. No one can deny that. No Protestant, no Protestant minister could deny, without going against Scripture, that God's mission to his church was to make converts, first and foremost. That's the beautiful thing, I think, about Christendom in some respect. The Ummah, the Islamic world order, was something of a product of the religion, because the stated goal of the religion was to conquer the world and to make all the world Islamic. However, for Catholicism, the creation of a world order was never on the agenda. The creation of a civilization was never on the agenda. It just happened. I think that's the beautiful thing about it. It organically occurred as a result of a society becoming Catholic. And that's really important, I think, to understanding where we are now and how we get out of the situation we're in. Because we're having some wire issues. I think that a large part of the problem today is that we're getting involved in these political disputes we don't need to be in. And the Conciliar Church, I think, has already signed their death warrant. They are going to back the conservative Republican Party and the conservative parties for social conservatism, and they're going to be used for votes, and more Catholics will leave because they vote Blue Dog Democrat, because they believe in things like, workers' rights and welfare options and things, and options for the poor, which, of course, are important, and options for the poor and things, and charity and things. And so it's going to go right on dividing the church straight down the middle. It's going to go right on to politicizing our catechism, and it's going to go straight on to Americanism, even, because the Catholic Church is becoming the Conciliar Church is becoming so embedded not only with ideas, American ideas about religion, but it's becoming embedded with political ideas about America, which do not match Catholicism. Catholicism is a 2,000-year-old religion. You don't just exist for 2,000 years without coming up with a lot of ideas about a lot of stuff and then applying them, which has historically happened. The Catholic Church has its own political philosophy, its own economic philosophy. It has its own teaching on the subject, which informed Catholics up until, I dare say, the Second Vatican Council, when all of that just kind of got thrown out the window. And, especially with the Cold War, when popes like Karl Wojtyla put the Catholic Church arm in arm with the West against communism, without any regard for the long-term political consequences of the matter, without any regard to the fact that the rise of communism was mostly a spiritual problem, without any regard to the fact that in the process of doing this and pursuing this policy, Karl Wojtyla would say and do many scandalous things that would bring discredit to the Catholic religion, without knowing that he would set an awful precedent for Catholic popes after him, who would become popular based off being the cool pope, or the not-so-Catholic pope, or, the pope that apologizes for everything, or the liberal pope, setting this awful example. And the fact is, Catholicism is neither conservative nor liberal. It existed before this political dichotomy was a reality. It is an entirely independent and entirely self-sustaining thing. Catholicism built Europe on accident. I think that's the beautiful thing here. To a point it was purposeful. Once it became a reality, the maintaining of Christendom was purposeful. But that was never the original goal. Christendom was obtained through conversion, through fulfilling Christ's promise. In a way, Christendom can be seen as a gift from God to us for our fulfilling of His mission. Well done, my good and faithful servant. We need to pick up on these lessons from our past, particularly the society. The society is in a great position to do this. I strongly believe that if the society is all about tradition and it's all about maintaining old Catholicism, I strongly believe that using the strategy of our forefathers, using the strategy of Archbishop John Hughes, we can make an impact. It may take years. I am perfectly happy to plant a tree that only my grandchildren will be able to sit under the boughs of in solitude and security, if it means one exists for them at all. I am perfectly happy to do that. It may mean I never get the satisfying crusade that I want. It may well mean that. Whatever it takes to make this happen, I'm willing to see it through. And every Catholic should have that mindset. Whatever we have to do should be done. And there are many people who are not convinced at this point. I know they're not. They're just waiting for the end to see what else I can say. They're typing out their comment as they watch the video. Well, my response to them would be, America's a democracy. You can wax on about how it's a republic or whatever, but the reason the Supreme Court decision was made was because the majority of Americans supported same-sex marriage. There was a powerful lobby behind it. That's how you get things done in a democracy. The problem is that you're trying to soapbox for a religion that is not popular in the U.S. and that most of them don't believe. Catholicism is a huge religion in the U.S., but it is by no means the biggest religion. People say the church is 2 billion strong. Grow up. How many of those Catholics believe in the real presence? How many of those Catholics believe basic teaching? How many of those Catholics go to church? How many of those Catholics are just... They're cultural Catholics. They go for Christmas and Easter. And when they do go, they go to a conciliar parish because they don't know any better. You have a huge problem here, and you need to fix it before you do anything resolving this country. The way a minority wins in a democracy is quite simple if they want to achieve political dominance. The way you achieve that is through basically violent insurrection. You willfully depose the government and you just pray to God, I guess, or whatever you're putting your confidence in for this foolish endeavor, that the majority will not rise against you and absolutely crush you. Consider that, St. Paul deliberately advises against opposing the Roman government. The Roman government did things far beyond the scope of what I think any Catholic could ever have a nightmare about enduring under the American government. I mean, they skinned people and fried them. They roasted them. They lashed them. They beat them. They crucified them. They fed them to wild animals. I don't think the U.S. at its worst will do anything quite that awful. I really don't. In fact, there's no precedent for anything that awful in our whole history. I mean, butchery, yes, but anything that sadistic, being tied to a post and lit on fire to light somebody's garden, I severely doubt you're going to face anything quite that awful. And his advice is to not oppose the Roman Empire. And I'm sure there are many people who thought St. Paul was absolutely off his rocker. Like, what else are we supposed to do? Well, I'm pretty sure those people felt really stupid from wherever they were in eternity when they came to realize that several hundred years later, the Roman emperor would not only become Catholic, he would achieve one of the greatest victories in Roman history because of Catholicism. And even though the Roman Empire might fall, it would go on to inspire a new generation and a new civilization, being Christendom. It may be unsatisfying. It may be a long trudge. We may never see the results of it in our lifetime. But right now, what the society needs to do, what the church needs to do, I think, if I may be so bold as to suggest, it needs to look inward. It needs to grow itself. We need to make converts. We need to, get some lay action going on. We need to get, we need to really look into, missionary option once we get our core base, the people who are here to stay, the people who have already joined. Once we get them organized and catechized and see to the future of their children and their progeny, because of course SSPX families are going to have kids. Of course they are. I mean, I've seen SSPX families. They're like FSSP families. They take up a whole pew, some of them. So I think it's very important that we see to that, and that we see to that marriages and births are booming, that we can get priests out of these families, that we can continue to foster the growth, that these people will be wealthy benefactors for the church, and that they will give their own time and their own sweat and their own energy to building the church, to growing the church. House masses, if we have to. It's better than nothing. It's a far cry from the catacombs. Although I've heard that some people in the early days of the society, the only place they could get a mass, a proper mass, was at a funeral chapel, a funeral home chapel. So it literally was, for some of these older people, it was going back to the catacombs. I've heard Michael Davies and many other people from the Remnant talk about this. So it may well be that for a very long time. We may well be like that. And the fact is, interfacing with the American political system is not working. It is a strategy that's not working. And I'm a guy that likes to do things that work. I don't like to do things that don't work. Madness is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. And it is patent madness to try and seize control of a democracy when you're the minority. It's never going to happen. It's not going to work. You honestly have more chance under a monarchy, because at least then you can petition the ruler and hopefully get an answer. It happened in a lot of monarchies. Lots of monarchies fared better. Lots of minorities fared better under monarchies than they did the republics and democracies that deposed them. So that's really what I want to close on. And my second round of observations for the society is that there is potential here. There is real potential here. I see something very powerful in the SSPX. I have never felt the way I did when I was at their masses. I've never quite felt that level of spiritual edification, but I won't share that because I feel like it's, in a way, it's something personal, but in a way it's something that I just feel like it's not the time to share it. So my advice would be to, meditate on this. I'm a new guy to this whole thing. I'm a nobody at this point. I can only hope that perhaps like-minded people will see this and will understand where I'm coming from with this strategy. If you're a traditional Catholic and you've had your misgivings about the society, hopefully after I watch this documentary and I give some more thoughts on the society, I'll have more to say. But for now, that's all I've got. Good night, God bless, and enjoy your Sunday.